Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Townsville Enterprise webinar. Today we're going to talk about the economic impacts of COVID and have a look at the North Queensland regional economy pre-COVID, what's currently happening at the moment and what will potentially happen post-COVID, because no doubt we are in unprecedented times. Joining us is our panel of experts. As always, today we have senior economist from AEC Group, Jonathan Pavetto. Hello, Jonathan.
Howdy.
Great to have you, mate, here. And also Managing Director from Colliers International, Peter Wheeler. Hey, Pete.
All right, how are you?
Very well, thanks, mate. As always, we are taking your questions. You can send your questions through on the Zoom webinar, or you can go and email tal@tal.com.au. If we don't get those questions today, we will have an opportunity to answer those and put them up on the blog. Jonathan, I want to start with you first. I guess pre-COVID, let's talk a little bit about that. Obviously, post-2016, after Queensland Nickel closed, the region went through some tough times. But is it fair to say that, throughout 2019, in particular, towards the end of last year, we were seeing some positive signs?
No, you're right there, Wade. And when we look at what's happened in the past year in the Townsville economy, and when I say Townsville economy, I'll talk about the broader region to include Hinchinbrook, Burdekin and Charters Towers, is that we saw some pretty good figures come out at the start of the year for employment for the region. And we had some really good improvement into where we were going with our economy. As you mentioned, we had a bit of a rough trot. A few things happened locally that gave us some pretty bad employment prospects, but things certainly were on the improve. And I've just got some quick numbers here to look at that. So for example, our economy was generating twice as many full-time jobs as it was part-time jobs. That's a pretty phenomenal place to be.
Yep.
And our employment rate came down 1.8% for the year, with a reduction of 5.4% for youth unemployment, which we know is a big problem in a lot of places. So to see that youth unemployment figure come down nearly by a third was a pretty phenomenal place for our economy to be in. So we came into this crisis in a pretty good place. A lot of the industries that were propping up our performance, like construction, were doing quite well. And we've come into this situation where we are now a lot better than a lot of other places have been. So the strong year that we had last year could have been better. Obviously, everything can always be better, but we did come into it in a good place.
And last year, those positive numbers that you're speaking about, do we know what that was, off the back of?
So a lot of the good employment numbers that we've got really came through from a number of key sectors, and the biggest one without a doubt was construction. So to have the state and the federal government stimulus program with the stadium, with the new water pipeline, with other different initiatives, it was really making a difference to the local economy.
And we see those projects now, going forward, holding us in a good position.
Well, a lot of the projects that were funded were things that weren't just an initial cash hit, but they were designed to give us a longer term economic productivity gain. So things like the water pipeline, for example, isn't just about spending money on construction. It's about giving us more water security for the future, which then drives a better business environment. Things like the road upgrades with safety improvements. These are things that are not just good for construction, but also provide an economic benefit going forward. So a lot of the gains that we had through the investments that were made really did start to translate. Well, hopefully we can see that translate into improved productivity in the economy.
Jonathan, pre-COVID, where are North Queensland's strengths for those that may not be fully across where our strengths are within this region?
So if we look at what parts of the economy are employing people and I can break this down by local government area. So what we've got in Townsville, the biggest industry that employs people is healthcare. That's not a surprise. We've got a very large hospital in Townsville City that services the region. But the other parts of the economy that employ a lot of people include retail trade, education and training, particularly primary and secondary education, as well as tertiary education, food and beverages and defence. So when we look at our economy in Townsville and we look at the sectors that employ people, we've got some of the biggest employing sectors aren't terribly exposed to COVID. When we look at the broader region, so for example, the Hinchinbrook Shire or the Burdekin, Agriculture plays a very dominant role. We'd expect the sugar industry to do quite well as it has been going. We're not expecting compared to a lot of other parts of the economy, we're not expecting the sugar industry to feel a lot of pain from COVID-related impacts. When we look at places like Charters Towers has got a strong focus, has always had a strong focus on primary education, secondary education, servicing the Western communities, as well as on mining. And we'd expect those parts of the economy to continue on reasonably well too. So when we look across our region, when we look at the things that keep us going and that have kept us going for quite a long time, whether it's defence, whether it's healthcare, whether it's agriculture or mining, these are things that will continue to drive the economy going forward, even as a lot of businesses and a lot of individuals start to feel the pain through some economic slowdown with COVID.
Now let's talk about COVID, because you led with that. I guess those in the industries like tourism, hospitality, events, retail, that they are doing it very, very tough at the moment, as with a lot of places around Australia. There's no denying that, isn't there? That right now, they're notwithstanding, you mentioned some of those strengths and some of those other areas in the economy, but I guess those that have been impacted have been really impacted.
You're right, Wayde, and there's no two ways to go about it. We can't sugarcoat the situation. What's going on now in the economy is impacting people, it is impacting jobs, it is impacting businesses. If it's not impacting them directly, it could be impacting them indirectly. For example, if you've still got all your staff and you still have to be trading, you might have difficulties getting your supplies, and that could be impacting your business. So there's a whole range of different things we could be looking at here in terms of impacts. I mentioned healthcare. Obviously, healthcare is very topical at the moment because there's strong demand for it. But some of the stuff we've seen out of the United States recently was that although healthcare as a sector, you'd say, would have a lot of money going into it right now, and it does, but it can be patchy. For example, if you're a dentist or if you're a physio or if you're in elective surgery, then you wouldn't be doing much business right now, and you might have staff that are in a similar position, or your business might be in a similar position to someone in retail. So we've got to understand that there are a lot of impacts going on. It's not smooth sailing for anyone by any stretch of the imagination, but looking at where our economy is and what drives demand and what brings the money in, I think we're in a better position than places like Cairns or the Whitsundays or the Gold Coast that are very heavily reliant on tourism and international travel, which clearly for the next little while is going to be a big no-no.
Yeah, it will be significantly impacted. What are you seeing some of the impacts happening right now? I know it's very early to tell, and a lot of the data, doesn't come for some time, but any trends starting to emerge at the moment?
Well, the biggest thing that we've got to keep in mind, as you said, the data will take a while to catch up to where we're going. Anecdotally, the restriction on movement is a big barrier for a lot of people. And as soon as we start to see that lift, as soon as we start to see some semblance of normal where people can go out and they can go to the shops, or they can go out and have dinner with people, or they can go out and get, go to the movies, do those sorts of things, that'll see the economy tick along. But between now and then, everything that's not essential really is in lockdown and will be impacted by what's going on.
And I guess, have you been impressed at the way businesses have almost like pivoted, or I guess evolved to take on these new restrictions? I mean, creation of drive-throughs, restaurants using takeaway. Again, really difficult times, but you would think once the economy starts, that might be a component of their business.
Yeah, well, small business owners and people that run businesses are very exceptional people. They tend to be, by nature of what they do, they've got to be experts in a lot of things. So people that see opportunity, people that want to lean into a situation, you might not be able to change what's going on, but if there's a way that you can survive or do something different or innovate or try new products or try new services, that's what business is all about. And we've got some very good business people in North Queensland, got some very successful business people in North Queensland. And although the world's changing and our economy locally is changing, it doesn't stop there being opportunities out there that people can change the way they do business to capture those benefits.
All right, we'll talk a little bit about, currently, I guess in summing that up, there are the region's strengths, as you've highlighted just before, those that are being significantly impacted by the restrictions and almost forced closures and are doing it tough, but there are those pockets of strength. Where do you see North Queensland, I guess, post this? Obviously, it depends on when those restrictions are eased, but where do you see the opportunities for North Queensland?
Well, what we can do is we can lean into our strengths. And we know that we do a good job in agriculture. We know we do a good job in mining. We know that we do a good job with defence. These are parts of the economy that are going to be pretty well isolated from ongoing problems, because at the end of the day, people have still got to eat. They still need products to build things, to manufacture things with, that we supply from our area. And that can put us in good stead going forward. So if we can lean into those to try and leverage the benefits that they currently provide to the economy that they have in the past, if we can help them make a bigger contribution into the economy going forward, that would be a really good outcome.
And is that about also government policy in relation to, lowering input costs, also about, becoming more globally competitive? And I guess a big theme post this is Australia becoming more self-sufficient. Is it fair to say we're fairly well placed in relation to that?
Well, there's a few, you're right to point on things that government can be doing to make sure the economy ticks along quite well. And we've got some pretty basic things that we've known that haven't been a big secret up here for a long time. We've known that the cost of electricity is a big problem. That holds the economy back. We know that the cost of insurance is a big problem. That's holding the economy back. If the state and federal governments are really serious about us going forward as a region and about returning to economic prosperity in Australia, then we've really got to start addressing these hard issues. We can't keep going and saying they're too hard to address. We've got to take them on. We know what the solutions are. We've just got to go along and do it. And if we can bring the cost of power down, if we can bring the cost of insurance down, it means that businesses have more money in their pockets to employ people. It means they've got more money in their pockets to invest in their business and provide extra services. And it means that households have got more money in their pockets that they can spend in local businesses. So all of those things would be very good for our economy if we can get the big ticket items resolved. And they are really the price of electricity and the price of insurance in the north.
So I guess going forward, for those strengths in our region, there are opportunities.
Yeah, well, if we want agriculture to proceed, then we need to make sure that we're fast-tracking the approvals processes for dams so we can plant more crops. If we want agriculture to succeed, we need to make sure that the price of water that we've got in the Burdekin is going to be effective in order for farmers to be profitable and to produce high-value products. If we want mining to go ahead, then we need to be approving mines. We can't be sitting on the approvals processes for 3 years, as we've seen with other mines. This could be an opportunity to look at how we can overhaul how government does business. And what I mean by overhaul how government does business in looking at the approvals processes. If governments want to encourage people to invest, we've got to be making it easy for people, not hard. And we've had a pretty unfortunate track record of governments making it hard for people to invest in large projects that would create substantial jobs. Hopefully we can get that fixed and changed so that we can, when we start coming out of these movement restrictions, that we can really start get the economy ticking along again and getting on and doing what we know how to do best in North Queensland, and that's run good businesses, run good farms, run good mines, employ people, sell to the world, and make a bit of money in the process.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. Look, we've covered a lot of ground. Before I go to Pete Wheeler, anything else that we've missed during what we've covered? There will be an opportunity for questions after, of course, but anything we've missed at this stage?
Well, I think I've just got to reiterate the point that things are tough right now. There's no two ways to sugarcoat it. But when we look at how our economy is built in North Queensland, both in Townsville and in the outlying areas of Hinchinbrook Shire, Burdekin and Charters Towers, our economy is in a much better position than a lot of others. We came into this situation with an improving economy, and what makes up our economy is not as susceptible to the shocks that we can expect to see in other parts, in other areas in Queensland. So, for example, our economy is not so reliant on tourism. We've been trying to build tourism up, and we've been doing a good job at that. But we're not in a position like with Sundays or Cairns that's heavily reliant on international travel. So that's a good thing. It means that we've got some economy that we can rely on, that we can lean on, and we can push forward from over the next 6 months, over the next years ahead, that we can generate more prosperity and more employment opportunities in the north.
Yeah, very good point, mate. Very good point. We'll come back to you very shortly with a couple of questions. We'll now go to Pete Wheeler, the Managing Director at Colliers International in Townsville. G'day, Pete.
Wayde, how are you?
Very well, mate. Very well. I guess hearing what Jonathan's had to say, earlier in the year, towards the end of last year, what were you seeing in terms of, the commercial side of real estate in relation to inquiries and things like that?
Yeah, look, couldn't have been better, I guess, or probably the best we'd seen at Wayde in almost, a decade, I'd have to say. Especially leading into Christmas, we could see that there was some, strong interest and inquiry was on the rise, and investor inquiry, of course, had been, strong for quite some time. So the southern investors certainly aren't afraid in investing in Townsville, which has been was a good sign. Other pockets of the market that had been struggling for some time were starting to improve as well. Industrial, I guess, in particular, quite high vacancy rates there. Industrial land, hadn't been selling really much at all. There hadn't been any large volumes there. But at one stage, I think it might have been early in the year, in the space of a quarter, we sold more industrial blocks of land than there had been, in a year. So there were definite positive signs, and I guess some of that industrial stuff would be off the back of the resurgence of resources and I guess the pipeline of projects that are happening out there. So construction, things like that. So look, we really were very well positioned. I mean, it's such a shame when you think about it now. It just seems a distant memory to be going along and seeing Elton John at the opening of that, wonderful stadium we've got, and the Cowboys game that was after it. And I think it's really catalytic infrastructure like that really pushes an economy and a market along. And we were definitely feeling that.
What did you feel post that first, I guess, opening game and the Elton John? The sentiment around town, Pete. What were you seeing? Because you have a lot of interactions and contact with a lot of people, investors, business people. What were you sensing?
Oh, look, everybody was riding on a high. I mean, it was really incredible. I mean, I remember walking into that stadium and walking along the boardwalk, and it was almost like, you were thinking you could have been anywhere else, in the world or the country. And so, yeah, I mean, definitely, post Elton John and then with the Cowboys game, sentiment was, as I said, as positive as I'd seen it in a while. And even just talking with businesses around the place, Wayde, which I generally like to ask the question how people are going, just to see if we're not sort of looking at it with rose-coloured goggles all the time, being together optimistic real estate agents. But no, we were getting some really good feedback. People that, were saying that things were improving in their businesses. And so, no, in my opinion, the confidence was riding, very high.
And you mentioned some of the sectors there. Industrial seemed to kick along at the start of the year. Any others pre this COVID event?
Oh, well, I mean, the investment market, as I said, is strong, been strong for a while. The owner-occupier market, Wayde, which is people that own businesses that are buying premises as opposed to leasing, that had been very strong for quite some time. And particularly in the CBD area and in and around, obviously, the stadium, there were lots of people who were, I guess, starting to jockey for positions in the CBD, whether that was investment or, owner-occupier. So, yeah, definitely that's another part of the market. That sector of the market had been strong for quite some time because interest rates are at that historical low and whatnot. But definitely there was strong interest in and around that CBD, and there, and there still is, albeit it's probably a lot of people have just pressed the pause button at the moment. But I mean, it's a shame we lost a lot of really great momentum, and but look, we're confident we'll pick that up on the other side.
Well, yeah, you mentioned that pause button. Is that sort of what's happening at the moment? Investors are sort of just going, okay, well, we know that fundamentally that it's a fairly diversified economy, but yes, right now, while there's a bit of uncertainty, we'll just hit the pause button.
Yeah, that's definitely. Sadly, a bit of that has happened, but we're still receiving some good inquiry, and they're
Yep.
happy to have a discussion and have a look at the properties and go through the motions. But definitely the bulk of it is saying, look, we just want to pause at the moment and see where this all goes.
Now, I guess a big positive that's been announced, was it last week, the sale of the Verdi building in Townsville for 90 odd million. Just talk us through that in terms of not only scale for this region, but I guess across Queensland, because it's positive news, and it must bode well for Townsville.
Oh, it was fantastic news for Townsville, absolutely, no doubt. I mean, I think we made the comment that price tag of $93 million, I mean, normally you don't see sales of that magnitude in Townsville or in the regions, typically related to, the southern capital cities and so forth. So, look, it was a huge boost of vote of confidence by, Castle Rock, a large funds manager out of Melbourne. And, naturally, we're pretty pleased to be involved in that deal. And, it's good for our business, it's good for our brand. But Wayde, more importantly, it's been fantastic for Townsville's brand. I mean, the airtime and the media channels that this went through around the country just, shocked us really. And, it got some really positive airtime, but there was, lots of headings that were coming through on different channels and that. And, Townsville on the up. Multi-million-dollar tick of approval for Townsville. And so, yeah, it is probably, a big deal for Townsville, but in the climate that we find ourselves in at the moment, also quite a substantial deal, across the country, because the volume of these sorts of transactions right down. So to see media come out from Townsville talking about the sale of a $93 million building, look, timing of that was beautiful. We would love to have seen what that looked like, rolling off the back of the momentum that we had from the stadium and all the things that we've just spoken about. I mean, that would have been fantastic. A couple of weeks prior to that, we've been fortunate to negotiate a sale to Sentinel Property Group of a building in Stanley Street. That was just shy of $11 million. Sentinel own a number of major assets in this town, very bullish on Townsville, don't need to be sold on it. If the properties tick all the right boxes, they're in.
So when those fund managers and those companies that are looking to invest, and you say tick all the right boxes, what do they like and what do they see positively about Townsville? And let's put the virus and COVID aside at this point in time.
Oh, look, Wayde, I think in a nutshell, a very good, diverse economy. And I guess a marketplace that was probably just on the turn and ready to take off in a lot of their minds, but really those basic fundamentals of a fairly solid economy. Now, I know there's sectors of that economy that were a little bit crooked there for a while and didn't serve us too well, but some of those have rallied. The resources sector and agriculture, have made quite a comeback. But then when you're underpinned by the largest army base in Australia, and you have a large health service, public service, two international quality universities, I mean, they're the things they look at, and they sort of they tick all the right boxes for those guys. But I mean, similarly, it's the same for private investors that might be spending $500,000 here or $5 million here. I mean, these people don't just park their money in any old town or region because they're chasing, a better return. I mean, that's essentially what brings them to the regions, no doubt, because their markets are overheated. But the attraction is not just chasing the return. It's making sure that they think where they're putting their money is a safe bet, and Townsville's just that.
Now, can you pull out the crystal ball for a minute? And we all know sometimes that crystal balls are just that. And you mentioned, being an optimistic real estate agent. But what do you see? Obviously, right now, and Jonathan spoke about those industries that are doing it tough, are doing it really tough.
Yes.
But coming out on the other side, and there's a lot of variables at play here. Where do you see Townsville going forward?
Oh, I think, Wayde, at the end of the day, it comes back to that diverse economy, really. I mean, I say it respectfully, but there's not too many other places, that I'd want to be when we're coming out the other side of this. So I think really it comes back to that. We're fortunate that a large amount of a fair percentage of our jobs are linked to a couple of major pillars of our economy. And we're fortunate that a couple of those other ones I talked about in resources and agriculture are starting to ramp up a little bit more. And I think that's going to hold us in good stead. It's a shame when you think about places like Cairns and Whitsundays and Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast. They're fantastic, cities and towns, no doubt. But they're obviously going to find it a lot tougher than where we are here in Townsville, because we do have that diversity in our economy.
Yeah, very good point. Again, we've covered a fair few things, Pete. The positive news about that big sale. Does the positive press? Does it prick other investors' ears up to say, "Hey, I might start having a look at that place"? Does it have a flow-on effect? Yeah,
absolutely, it does, and it will. And we might not see some of that till we get to a little bit of the other side of where we are now. But when it's in the likes of the Financial Review and a lot of those News Corp media channels and papers, I mean, as I said, it's gone everywhere. A lot of the major investors, property owners, tenants, businesses, are reading those publications, and there's absolutely no doubt that they would have sat up, had a look, and probably, spoke amongst themselves and said, we might need to take a closer look at this place in the future. So I definitely think it's going to have that sort of positive impact.
Yeah, and finally, mate, anything before we go to a couple of questions, anything we haven't covered that you think is of importance, I guess, right now?
No, not really. I think it's just, I guess, while there's some businesses out there that are doing very well, we know there's a lot of businesses that are doing it quite tough. I see them as, some of them have been, very resilient. I guess, as mentioned in the paper recently, some of them, I guess, the diversity or how they've been able to pivot and come up with ideas, to change the way they do business in these tough times. A lot of our great restaurants around town doing takeaway, which is, fantastic. And, restaurants, turning the front of house into butcher shops and, make through drive-throughs that have been made up by people, some really good, I guess, smart ideas in what otherwise, are very challenging times. But, in saying that, there are some businesses that are doing tough. And look, we really hope that, a majority of those will make it out the other side.
Yeah, very good point, Pete. Very good point. A question for Jonathan that's come in. You listed mining as one of the three key sectors that we can lean on. What impact do you see from import and export challenges? I guess that's around sort of supply chain and the like.
Yeah, I had a bit of a look into what's going on in the resources sector and some of the key resources areas that we have, and the demand for the resources that we produce will still be very strong. So the demand for thermal coal, for example, will continue as different countries look to their own economic recovery. A lot of that we can expect to be infrastructure related. So that'll support things like coking coal and iron ore. So that'll be good for Australia and North Queensland as well. So, but you are right. The question was right to look at some of the challenges that face. So while the outlook might be positive, there could be some really substantial day-to-day things that could occur. So, for example, it might be more challenging to move staff around. It might for fly in, fly out or drive in, drive out mines. It might be more challenging to unload ships in other ports because the international supply chains on the receiving side might not be as sophisticated as ours. So there could be those challenges that could come up, but the good news is that long-term demand isn't expected to drop off for a lot of the product that we produce in the mining sector. And that goes for the same as the ag sector as well. So the question was about the supply chain. Yes, there could be some challenges there. They'll have to be met on a case-by-case basis. Most of the problems are probably going to be on the receiving end where we export to, but I'm sure that we can find practical ways around those.
Yeah, good point. I guess both a question I guess it's a statement that those that haven't been as impacted, is the message support those that have. Is that a fair point, Jonathan, Pete?
Yeah, of course. I mean, everyone's in this together. So if we've got people that have done reasonably well out of this. We hope that they're supporting the rest of the community and the rest of the economy, because no doubt there'll come a time when their own business might not be doing so well, and they would hope that others in the area would be able to support them too. So a lot of people have said it. I'll say it as well. It's important that we buy local. It's important that we support locals, and that even in this world where everything's online, try and find a local that does it, so we can make sure that we're supporting the locals in our own community, so that when times change and we need their support, that they'll still be around to support us.
Pete, I'll throw it over to you. It's like that you're preaching to the converted here.
Yeah, it is. Look, and I just echo everything that Jonathan has just said there. I agree totally. I mean, I've always been a huge fan and a supporter of, buying local. Personally, never been much of an online man. I think that, and whilst that's necessary, I think that can affect jobs for our, kids and things in the future. And obviously just, supporting local businesses. I know sometimes you jump online and you can pick things up a bit cheaper. But look, honestly, local businesses, local families, you really, no time more than now to absolutely get offline, get out and spend some money in some of these people's businesses. And, seeing things getting around on Facebook and the likes about, some of the companies around town that, have thrown sponsorship money around to junior sport and charities and all those sorts of things. Don't forget about those businesses. Get back out and support them, would be my message.
Good message, Pete. One last question that's come through. Any thought at this point in time on COVID-19 effect on, I guess, real property valuations in the commercial and industrial sectors in Townsville?
Yeah, look, not really sure about that at the moment.
Early days.
Interesting piece. It's early days. Look, and I'd like to think that it's sort of, values and things like that go into hibernation as well. And but yeah, a bit early at the moment. But I'd certainly like to think that they were just put on hold. I mean, so hoping that will very much be the case, and I suspect it will.
All right, we're just about to wrap it up, conscious of time. Jonathan, I'll come to you. Your final thoughts today.
I guess we're in challenging times, no doubt about that. No need to harp on it. We all know it. But the opportunities are out there for our region. We've got some good fundamentals in our economy. We can leverage those going forward. Looking at Townsville as a city and our region as a whole, we can certainly be leaning into the fact that we are not a very densely populated urban area. That could be a real strength for us going forward. We've got a whole lot of people who live in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, that have been locked in their tiny little apartments in the middle of the city with the family for the past month. And I'm sure that there could be an opportunity for those people, now that working remotely is not a barrier to a lot of our jobs, to be wanting to be in a place where they can have a backyard. And that's something that we have in North Queensland. But the challenge is on for us to make sure that we've got a livable city, that we're providing all the different options and solutions and things that should be available in a metropolitan area. One of those things is transport. So as a city and as a region, if we can do better in transport, moving people around, not needing to rely on a car as much as we currently do, I think we can position our city to be a far better place, far more livable place, to attract people, to grow, and to do better out the other end of this virus than what we did when we came into it.
Terrific, mate. Well said. And Pete, your final thoughts?
Yeah, look, I agree with all of that. And I just think it's a time where we've got to try and remain as positive as we can. I know that's very difficult in quite challenging circumstances, but, just keep the message out there about all those positive things and where we were before this all started. I'm sure we'll pick that momentum up on the other side, but I know with our team and the people that they're continuing to talk to, we really just get away from the situation where we are now and talk about those things where Townsville was heading, and that we're reasonably confident that will be there when we get to the other side, and that we think we have a better chance of rebounding quicker than others. So as I said, it's very hard obviously to stay positive when some people are doing it very, very tough, but I think it's important more than ever to keep the message out there, and just, I guess, all those positive things about Townsville. And I'm sure, as I said, we'll pick them up on the other side, and hopefully we'll get going a lot sooner, than others.
We might have to go and get some takeaway tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I mentioned to you the other day, Wayde. I mean, Dan Murphy's. You know, I'm on just about on a first name basis there, as we are with some of the takeaway shops. So, but again, that's about getting out there, and particularly with those local takeaway shops and our restaurants and so forth.
Good on you, Pete. Thanks very much. Thanks for your time, Pete.
No worries. Thank you very much, Wayde. Always a pleasure.
Jonathan, thanks for your time and insights as well, mate.
Thanks, Wayde. Thanks, Pete.
Well, I
Thanks,
guess to wrap it all up, you heard the pre-COVID, the region, there were certainly signs of an economic resurgence. Well and truly, those industries and sectors that are being impacted now are doing it really tough. There are some positives, though, about the strength of this region in mining, advanced manufacturing, agriculture, defence, health and education. And I think finally, gents, it's just a bloody good place to live.
Yeah, absolutely is.
Thanks very much for joining us on the webinar today. The replay of this webinar will be online at townsvilleenterprise.com.au. If you did have any questions that might have just popped up now, please email us at tell@tell.com.au. And till next Thursday, where we'll do our next webinar, we'll see you then. Good afternoon.